What is up, guys, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, your one-stop spot for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Tumblely Drunk, and tonight on episode 53, we're going to be taking a look back at the start of the Countdown Cup. We had a couple of Map 5s, one of which completely dominated the week in regards to fantasy scores. Which is kind of polarizing, because the one that we saw in APAC was kind of like middle of the pack. You know, we got a couple of new additions. We got to see some really wonky things, both in who was playing what, and also what sort of team compositions we were seeing, knowing that it was the start of a new hero rotation. Quite a bit to go over tonight, but before we can do that, let me introduce you to my co-host. So up first, making his glorious return, is Boomer Bob. Bob, good to have you back, my friend. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good and excited to talk about this super weekend of Overwatch.
Ba-dum-bum.
Absolutely, and that was definitely one of the more intriguing things that happened for sure. But let me throw things over to Ed. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just grand. I am like, I don't know why, but when you said new edition, I just laughed because all I could think of was the band.
Oh my gosh.
And
And
then I'm
I'm
like,
the Boomer.
Shut up. Come on.
You gonna start singing New Kids on the Block for us now, Ed?
Okay, little known Ed fact.
Oh, 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 oh,
Oh,
oh, oh, oh. The right
right
stuff.
stuff.
She's
First
got the right
concert
stuff.
I ever went to.
Same!
Kids
Oh
on the
my
Block.
god, that's so sad. My mom took us when we were little kids.
See, now the thing is I can't be blamed for mine, because I was so young.
Yeah, I
that-
was super young.
like I was super young, and like my sisters, two older sisters, diehard New Kids fans, and my parents were like, well, it's cheaper for us to just buy him a ticket because they had to take them
Rather than get you,
rather than
yeah.
get a babysitter for me, so they just took me with. So my
See-
first concert was New Kids on the Block.
My little girlfriend at the time really wanted to go. So for my birthday, my mom took my girlfriend and like two of my buddies and another girl all to the concert. That's hilarious, though.
Wow.
Weird tangent. Weird tangent.
Wow.
And we're going to be talking about this when in 2 weeks. Who gives a shit about Overwatch, Apex, Classic WoW, Hearthstone? Because you know what comes out in 3 weeks? The first map of Tony Hawk 1 and 2. if you pre-ordered.
Now,
Just saying.
which is
saying.
all of us.
now I will say, didn't you play the little? It was like $15. Someone redid Tony Hawk 1 in the Unreal Engine years back on the Xbox 360, and you could buy it for like $15, and you could play the entirety of the first game, and it was almost exactly right on.
That I did not play.
Oh man, you missed out because I already got to relive it, and I don't think I'm getting the new Tony Hawk.
Oof.
We
Oh
support
my
our boy
God.
Tony. We don't.
Well, you
We have
know,
to support Mr. Hawk.
the majority of us will still be playing. And Ed, congrats on the winning draft royale this week.
Hell
we
yeah.
actually got everyone in, which is always great. And, you know, unfortunately, Ramses, you are holding down that number
Oh.
4 slot for this week.
I was so close.
Bro, I trusted my memory to put the right lineup in. And I have one lineup that I use for some other, like I used for the Draft Buff League, I used for the Sideshow League, and I did pretty well. And I forgot to put that lineup in our league. So I finished dead last. By
Likely story.
Because originally I was running Kareev and Paintbrush, which put out pretty well. But this time, for our league, I put in Chris and Bedosian, who both did squat. So,
I scored 120 more points than you.
oh no, I was super bad this week because I also put in Decay, which we know what happened with Decay. But
He still scored pretty good for
He did
3
good,
maps, you know?
but not as well as everyone that played the 5.
No matter
Yeah.
what my hat says, being a Houston fan means life is continually pain. Maybe you feel a little bit better about the pain because at least you like performed a little well. But that map 5 where they show, like Dallas just has to hold on, and you see Blase meteor strike off of the point, and then the timer ticks down, and right as he's about to slam down, the timer cuts out.
Oh man.
He's been showing on his Twitter just for the past week. It's just been him and Dante watching that video in his room with all the lights out, just eating food and crying.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
picked my entire
Awkward.
team, and then I had like 26 points left, and I was like, LH Claddy, maybe you'll play. I felt like if he didn't, I still could win with the lineup I had. That was close.
Yeah, definitely a couple of surprises in regards to like some people who started, like Bishu being one of them, suddenly came back into the rotation. But obviously, guys, we cannot talk about Week 24 and people who played more than what we saw from the San Francisco Shock. So, the Shock did something a little bit different. They subbed in Super, who was actually playing the damage role as the team's Genji. And what we saw was not spectacular, but was still effective. Obviously, he was pretty good at, building up the Dragon Blades. There were quite a few occasions where he was able to just decimate the Boston Uprising support line in quick succession. And the Dragon Blades were honestly pretty whiffed. They were pretty scuffed kind of throughout the entirety of the series. But it's been interesting kind of gauging the community reaction to it, because you're not used to seeing these players stepping off of the tank position to suddenly becoming a DPS player for a team. And then you factor in, well, was this completely based off of how Super did in scrimmages, how many other DPS players on the team were actually competing for that same slot? And all of a sudden, the Shock signs Talio from Third Impact, who is the first Japanese player to hit the league, who has primarily been known in the past as a hit-scan DPS player, dating all the way back to the early 2016 days of Overwatch, when he had competed on multiple Overwatch World Cup teams for Japan, had been on dual citizenship, competed in NA contenders with Third Impact, but mostly still playing hitscan, but he has played quite a bit of projectile in the past, so now, who knows, is this going to be the end of Super Genji, who, by the way, I was looking through to see, okay, how's he doing, against, say, Hydration, who obviously went from DPS to tank for the Outlaws, and, Super was, 13th overall, if you would count him as a DPS player. He still put up 100+ points, which, Ramses, even based off of the tank production that we had seen in these past few weeks, in, really any other week, that would have been a pretty strong tank showing as well.
I know you and I, even as a lark, I know we were discussing, well, it's going to be Reinhardt this week, right? Throw Super, maybe Super gets points. And we didn't think he would be on the Genji at all. But I have to imagine we're not going to see that much more Genji, only because there is one team, maybe two teams that you would play that Genji with, and it would be either Boston or Washington if you're San Francisco. And while it was short-lived, I'm happy we got to see it. I think Super's going to go back to the bench, only because it seems that San Francisco is more comfortable running the Winston Sigma comp instead of the Ryan Sigma comp we've been seeing for other teams. And I do have to say, when you have a team that is as good as San Francisco enabling you, and you have a team that is in that's a mean way of saying it, as who is struggling as much as the Boston Uprising, it makes sense why he would get that many points. I'm pretty sure we could have thrown Bob on the Genji. He would have probably gotten at least 6th or 7th place Genji points.
I actually have a good example for that. The last time that I placed playing DPS, now Reaper was in the meta, so I'm pretty good on that hero, but not as good as I placed. I played with a six stack of Diamond to Masters caliber players, and I placed like 3158. You know, and I don't like I hadn't been in Diamond and DPS since like Soldier went out of the meta, and so
Mhm.
yeah, I think if you have good like DPS can do a lot better when they have the tanks and supports to really push it, you know, and then really good DPS can just destroy.
Push it. But push it
push it
real
real good.
good.
Sorry.
I mean, this move was by them was pure flex move on them. Like it's bumper on Hanzo type of move. Like everyone had been like, "Ooh, you know, what about Super's Genji?"
I
well,
mean,
Yeah, but
no.
Bumper on Hanzo did it for like a second and a half, you
and
know.
it was also
this
map-
extremely aggro in his case.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah, this was
Super was more
extreme-
passive.
Yeah, this was BM and memeage to the max, man. This was even better than I think DB said it. This was even better than Chipsa, the living god.
Chipsa versus Super match win.
Oh, dude, that would be good. I would totally go for that. Although, would you do Genji versus Doom? Yeah, you could.
Symmetra.
Yeah, I don't know if you
Symmetra
could do that. Yeah, Genji versus Doom, I don't think is a fair fight.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
but-
especially with Chipsa, but both of them on Genji, I think it'd be kind of fair.
And it's all for not now. Like, they signed somebody else to play Genji, so you know.
I mean, you would have to imagine, and it is worth mentioning that we can confirm that Tayo is with the team. He was already
he's-
competed in
he-
NA. He was in NA
He is
already.
NA.
Yes, so
Okay,
important to
that's
note
good.
there.
Because I'm like, man, what if they run Ons and him? It's like, all right, we're gonna have two people from Asia playing on our DPS team.
Right.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, because I know, like, when the signing was made today, a lot of people were like, well, I don't know if you would play him over on like, the Ashe role, and his Tracer's probably not as good as Striker, so, you know, he's kind of, like, pigeonholed at that point onto the Genji role. Either way, like, we'll have a good indicator, and, you know, based off of the Shock schedule, like, they do have some fairly capable games here within the next 3 series that they have, so I would not be surprised if Tayo basically just comes in and debuts outright, just right out of the gate. But let's talk about some of the performances that we saw this week. You know, we've been going over the top 3 per position every single week. And this week is a little bit different because a certain Texas Game of Thrones just completely decimated everyone in regards to production.
Not me, dude. If you noticed, I picked two Dallas and 2 Houston because I was pretty sure it was going to map 5.
On Totem, you and I even called it, but I don't think we expected it to be this strong and this
Right.
like consistent. Because for all 9 of the top of top 3 across the positions, it's Houston and Dallas players.
Yeah, normally when we see a really strong game, like, you might have like 3 or 4, but not every single one.
Good point. Good point.
So definitely something out of the ordinary in that regard as well. And, you know, even as I mentioned, like, that Hunter's Excelsior game, which also went to a map 5, which was a reverse sweep in favor of Chengdu, wasn't anywhere near this game in regards to the total points that were put up on the board. So looking at the DPS, Dante putting up overall like the 3rd best score of the week, but top in the damage at 196.88, followed by Blase, another name we're not used to really seeing here in this case, because he
Definitely
is
not.
the budget option at 38, but he put up 187.99, followed by Doha for Dallas at 174.88. Now, you know,
And just think about 38 costs too.
yeah, if you played Blase this week, you know, pat yourself on the back. And, you know, if it was like a traditional league, like, I could, you could probably make the argument that, more likely to get played, but like in a draft royale type setting, I'll be honest, like that wasn't one of the budget options that I was even eyeing at all. So to see him suddenly pop up here was a pleasant surprise. But man, like that game in itself just broke daily, really, if you think about
Yeah.
it.
All right, so I have a question because I didn't catch all the games because, well, I was sitting in a lake drunk for
Sounds amazing.
a good 48 hours straight.
Drooling.
Oh my god, it was amazing. All I didn't even have to get up to get beer.
Did it
Like,
just
I
float
love
to
the-
you?
Beer
No,
helmets.
No, so like my sister was there with my brother-in-law and their kids. So she was like up and around with the kids playing. I'm sitting in like I have like this little floating raft, and I would just be like, beer, and she'd go get me one.
Oh,
And you're in the floating raft, so you didn't even have to get up to go pee.
Exactly.
Oh, winning.
So I was winning at life, and so I didn't get to see. But did Blase actually play like?
Mhm.
They stuck with him the whole time?
Yeah.
Mhm.
They pretty much ran. So Houston ran a really weird comp because we'll go into meta in a little bit, but you generally saw like kind of the same DPS as before, where you'd have the Tracer or a Genji paired with an Ashe, and then you would have instead of a Orisa, you would have either a Winston or a Reinhardt, typically a Winston, but Dante just stayed on the Tracer or the Sombra pretty much the entire game, and Blase would switch between Genji or Doomfist.
So
Dude,
we didn't
yeah.
see any links or.
No.
No, they ran a ton of Sombra.
Mhm.
And honestly, if Dallas hadn't swapped over and matched their game, Dallas was getting worked. Well, I mean, they were close matches the first two, but like Houston was decidedly winning at the very end of the match using Sombra's ultimate. I mean, it was basically just like it was the I win button. So then later on, it turned into who's going to have the I win button last.
And
Okay.
And
You
there
know-
was some crazy stuff too. Like the last was it Route 66 that that Dante stunned or somebody stunned Doha out of his ultimate. And I mean, it was just like they were just each one was taking it to the next level.
yeah,
It feels very rough to be on the receiving end of the first reverse sweep in Dallas Fuel history, I will say.
I know, dude. After game two, I was like, yeah, you guys got this, Mel. And then it's just, I was like, oh, we won. Oh, we won another. Oh, this could happen. This could happen.
yeah,
What's
it's
Mel was like,
Yeah.
it's kind of
What
funny.
did you guys bet?
Oh,
we didn't.
unfortunate.
That's bullshit.
It's kind of interesting how the casters kept hyping up Dante Sombra, and then like the map after that is when he just kept holding on to the EMP and then just never used it. I think that was on like Volskaya, and then like you saw the momentum shift at that given
Bro.
point in time.
That's the
Yeah.
Cardinal Dante sin is holding EMPs on Volskaya specifically.
Mhm.
Well, like Liz Richardson always coins the term Houstonable, and it's
Mhm.
basically Houston will come out, and they did the same against who was it? The same against was it Miami, where they came out and they were just like really aggressive for the first two maps, and then they just get scared trying to lock out that third map, and they just start playing scared, and they're not going in as fast, they're not being as aggressive, and it's just seems like they just get freaked out.
Mhm. They're at least competitive, which I am grateful for. They are at least a competitive team, and part of that I think has to be the support duo. I know we're not super pro Raucous on this show, but it looks like they've gone. It looks like they've gone firmly into the Repel Jexay support camp, where you have Repel on your Zenyatta, or more often your Baptiste, and then Jexay on the Brig. Repel actually was the highest scoring support this week as well. He came in with 241.12 points, and he was 62 cost. Crimzo made his return to the always buy Crimzo list, where a stupid high score. He got 225.32 points, and he was 90 cost, so that makes sense. Jexay, with Houston had 157.36 points. He was 50, which he's been like a nice middle cost right there. The other thing which I can't get it on here because apparently I have to update the app, but Paintbrush also had really good scores as well. Paintbrush I think had around 130, 125 points as well. So everybody in the Dallas Houston match scored very well.
I actually had Jexay this time, mainly because it was kind of like a budget pick. As odd as that sounds.
Well, yeah, 50 is, I mean, we would definitely consider budget. That's kind of like the threshold that we have been using these past couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll take Jexay because I just need to fill, and it worked out well for me.
Yeah, just looking at Paintbrush really quick, because Ramses mentioned it. He was a 44 cost, and he put up 145.04 points, so not too far behind Jexay there.
I like freaking put in. Do you know that? Why am I blanking? Used to be a tank. Now
Hydration.
Hydration. Thank you. I put in hydration as damage because they still have him marked wrong on draft buff.
Yeah, Hulky, why is he so damaged? It's been a month.
Obviously, it didn't work.
No, it
He
didn't.
scores decently. He's been around.
But he was super cheap. He was like, I just needed some cheap options at the end, so I just got him for like, I feel like it was in the low 30s.
Oh, God, then I would take that. Yeah.
I do want to point out really quick, Bob, that Hydration actually put up lower points than Super Genji.
Yeah, I know. And he put 88, which I mean, that's another thing we didn't really talk about in the game. Hydration was throwing a lot of the time, man.
He was
Like,
getting
he was
targeted.
not looking good on
They
Monkey.
weren't running a good comp for him because they were running dive DPS, but they were keeping him on the Reinhardt.
Yeah, and
they-
then when he tried to do Monkey, he just like jump into a doorway of where everybody's at, just blow up. I mean,
I will say,
they put him on the ball.
I prefer him over Muma still.
Yeah.
I'll take him over Muma.
Yeah, it's been an interesting storyline to see progress, because it's fairly obvious that, like, if we're talking about the mechanical skill on some of these heroes, Hydration isn't quite there. So it's always kind of interesting to see how much teams are able to, like, kind of like bully him around whenever he is on something that necessarily isn't in his wheelhouse. And, you know, Ramses, like, every week you and I have been sitting down seeing, like, okay, like, Rio has been doing pretty solid. This week he's not in the top 3 because of this map 5 situation with Houston and Dallas. Note looked like really solid this week. That was a turnaround type of performance for some of his caliber, who put up the top points for tanks for Dallas at 160.77. We had Meko from the Outlaws at 156.13. And then Gamzu making a return to the top 3 for Dallas at 132.58 at a cost of 52. So again, like, Texas completely thrown down here. I know Rio had still put in around 100 points.
99.2.
And that seems to be about where he's been at every single week. So again, guys, like we talk about it every week when it comes to building out your roster. If you're looking for that middle ground, which there is quite a bit of options in regards to the tank lineups, but no one has been as consistent if we're talking about performances than Rio for the Guangzhou Charge. And honestly, like, I think he'd be the pick kind of across the board because we haven't really seen the same amount of consistency at one individual position on a week-to-week basis like that.
He's a pretty, like, he's your solid plug in and play because there's also no other main tank who's going to play for him, so you know he's playing every single game. And we talked about Ben Best last week, just to follow up on him. He had a decent scoreline. He put up 81 points, so solid performance. You got what you paid for, where you paid like 43 coins or something. So if you're playing him, you're obviously putting money into your DPS or your support over that. So,
And he sure is pretty.
yeah, we talk about not having personalities in Overwatch League. That guy's just the prettiest Overwatch League player.
He really is. It's just like Mel was looking at him. She goes, My God, he's gorgeous. I was like, I know.
He's like soccer player handsome is what it is.
Oh man, it's funny.
I would like to officially say here the Guangzhou Charge name be changed to the Guangzhou Karaoke
Okay.
because every single one of their players is like named after a song.
No, okay.
you have-
I didn't
no.
know where you're going with that.
Yeah. No, me and Totem have talked about this. Come on, Eileen. Happy. My name is Rio. Come on, ride the shoo.
Wait,
And
man,
Rowdy?
you mean Rio like the Duran
From
Duran song?
Duran?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name
Her name is Rio and she dances on
Oh.
the sand.
Whatever. Krong and Chara, I don't know about that.
What about
See, I thought
Neptuno
you were going more like if Japan ever gets a team, be a perfect name because it's
quick-
huge over there.
I would say a quick note about Guangzhou. Don't worry about Neptuno. Some stuff came out this week that he is going. The way his visa timing lined up, he is going back to Spain right now to get his visa reconfirmed because it was set to expire in September. So they're looking at it this way. He's going to miss this whole tournament, but he'll be here for playoffs instead of having to go home like at the end of the tournament right before playoffs and trying to somehow fudge a way to get back in quickly.
Yeah.
Because he has to
Nero,
do
though, I have no
quarantine,
idea.
right?
Yeah.
I know there's a
though,
quarantine
no
in
idea.
Korea. I just didn't know about China.
Well, they're in Korea, so I mean, they're
Oh yeah, they are. Okay.
everyone but Chengdu.
Yeah, so week 24 definitely brought in some polarizing differences in regards to the heroes that were being brought in. So just as a reminder, like this hero pool is also active for this weekend's game. So we don't have Mei or Widowmaker on the DPS. No Orisa this week, as well as Anna. And, last week, Ramses, you and I were discussing, like, okay, well, what's the likelihood of Genji kind of dominating again this week? And, very popular pick in both NA and Asia. But there were some key differences in regards to compositions that we saw that are definitely like worth looking into, especially like if you're someone who usually just tunes out of like the Asia Pacific games, because the tank lineup and the Merc and the support lineup in that situation are completely different from what we saw on the NA side this week. So when you look at Asia, and they had a breakdown of like all the hero usage on the Overwatch League website. Zarya not really seeing any playtime in NA, but that was the most popular tank pick out of Asia this week at 59.11. So we got to see a lot of Winston and Zarya, which is not a combination that we're really used to seeing. Where on the NA side, it was a pretty healthy mix of Sigma, either paired with, the Winston or Reinhardt primarily. But, both sides kind of like run a different like die variants. And then when you look at the support lineup too, Asia definitely favoring Zenyatta as like the secondary support option, but they were playing a lot of Mercy compositions, which again, completely opposite when you look at NA. NA had a pretty even kind of like lineup, basically running anything that wasn't Mercy in this case. So, it seemed like everything was about the same in regards to the damage, but the approach was completely different, which is just absolutely crazy to think about, where, on Asia, they were basically just going pure dive. We're not really seeing a ton of these Sombra compositions, to the extent that we were seeing in NA. They were still there, just not to the same extent here. And, like, I feel like if you look back at, the implementation of hero pools and just seeing how things have kind of gotten shaken up in regards to who was seeing play, I think this week was probably the most open things have kind of been since the get-go here, where you had those very distinct approaches in different regions, which is really what we wanted to see out of the gate.
Well, you know what though? Isn't this kind of what we all talked about? I know we've talked about it with a few of you on different shows this show, but we were kind of excited about everybody going back home and like having, actual physical distance between each other, and then different metas kind of forming in the different regions, and we're getting that now, on East and West. So it's neat. I mean, it's really cool. I'd love it if we got to see them clash more often, like
And we've always kind of seen this kind of disparity between the Asia region and NA EU type regions. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, forever China and over in Asia they're playing McCree left, right, and no one in NA is even touching McCree. And that's how Leave became so famous. For like his plays, because Leave went into the Overwatch World Cup with the McCree play that nobody's really seen,
and that was
and did well.
That was basically all of China, though. Like, that was very prominent throughout Chinese Overwatch contenders. Not so much in, like, the Korean contenders, but it's definitely been something that's kind of like, seeped into some of the Chinese Overwatch League teams. So, true to the area that it originated.
Yeah.
Well, I was just talking about just the Overwatch League when they were all in one spot. Like, the metas became copycat for the longest time.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's good to see the changes from it, obviously.
What's interesting was when we talk about like the separate metas, I don't know how much you guys got to watch the Chengdu game, but we got to see the most quick play comp I've ever seen in my life, which was Genji, Ashe, Wrecking Ball, Zarya, and I think they did Lucio, Zen. They might have done Moira. I think they did Moira Zen. And then they went Mercy for a little bit too. The APAC region's been very interesting to watch develop because it seems like they're way more committed to actually experimenting with stuff. Like you even saw, like, bringing up Chengdu again, them bringing out more experimental stuff rather than just running a straight up comp, because it feels like they're really pushing to see what's going to work, what's the way we can actually counter something. And then with NA, it's like, okay, well, this is what we were doing before. What's the closest substitute that we can put in to make that same thing still happen?
Yeah, and I feel like in Chengdu's case, though, a lot of that boils down to the fact that they have constantly been a step behind the rest of the region. So whatever they had been trying hasn't really been working. So they are at that point where they're trying all of these different approaches to see if any of these are actually going to be a viable option for them. And, like, to look back at that game, like, those first two maps, they got absolutely stomped by New York. Like,
Yep.
I for sure thought it was going to be a sweep, but, they dug deep, they turned it around, they got the reverse sweep, and, every week we're talking about how APAC just continues to constantly improve or be polarizing in the sense that, you got that level of parity within Asia where any team can beat any team on any given week outside of, like, maybe, Shanghai so far in the regular season because they've been one of the more consistent teams out there in the league this year. But, that's what we want to see, It's still hard to get a read on Chengdu, but, you like to see them implement these changes, knowing that they have had issues keeping pace with the rest of the teams in their area there.
They're getting new coaches, too. Or at least they're recruiting new coaches.
It's just been a bummer because those are the games that are hard to catch live, and I enjoy watching. The VODs are okay, but I really enjoy watching live.
The VOD this week is great because Wolf and ZP, I think they got drunk beforehand. I can't tell you because they're just like, they're like casting a little bit, but they're just cracking jokes and laughing the entire time. Like, Chengdu starts making this comeback, and they're just like, "What the hell is going on?"
Dude, I always crack up when I see ZP perform because he does such a good job. But I've met the guy in person, and like he was like really awkward, just like nervous around me, and I was like, "This dude, I'm nervous around you. Like you don't even know who I am. Like why are you nervous right now?" But I was just like, I was expecting him as a caster, to talk to me like that, because that's how the rest of them do, And like it was just so interesting that he's like, I mean, he flips a switch and he's like ZP the caster, and then it goes back to being ZP. I don't want to talk to anybody. Like,
Absolutely.
it's
And,
very interesting.
I do want to point out the Hulky is here. He says, I haven't tuned in live for a while. Is it just me, or did Ed's head get bigger?
My
It
head
keeps getting bigger
My head did
every
get better.
day.
Bigger. Yeah, it did.
That's why it takes up
it's
95% of the
freshly, it's freshly shaved today. So it's nice and shiny too.
It's even
So
more
when Ed
smooth brained.
You've just been missing the long con. See,
Yeah.
ever since he started podcasting, he's slowly been zooming his camera in week by week. Till pretty soon he'll be right up in there.
Nah, Ed's just getting more aerodynamic, just so when somebody leaves a bad review, he can chase them quicker.
I need to just start threatening people with breaking their kneecaps like I do on Dropping Spicy.
I mean,
I'm gonna go
gangsta.
Tanya Harding on all your asses.
It didn't work the last time. I'm just throwing it out there. At least here. But anyways, looking ahead, week 25 is here this weekend. Again, we'll have our draft royale contest up for the week between the four of us. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the games that we're eyeing to potentially build around. Now, I'm not saying, like, we're going to have a full lineup of any one particular game, but is there any game out there this weekend that you guys feel like could potentially match the Map 5 sort of situation that we saw out of Dallas and Houston this week? Which, I would say is going to be a pretty tall order just because it has been sort of an anomaly. All the Map 5s haven't been necessarily putting up that same amount of production, but there are some fairly enticing matches, and, I think for one, like, the one I'm having a really hard time kind of, like, gauging what sort of interest there would be right now is that Dynasty versus Hunters match that happens this Saturday at 1 a.m. Pacific time, because both of these teams haven't necessarily been living up to the potential. And Hunter's just coming off of a Map 5 win. Dynasty, though, is still getting hard to read, and, like, the tank situation is still pretty murky right now, so I don't know how to feel about that, but some really awesome games this weekend. Anything in particular really standing out for you guys?
Mayhem, San Francisco, baby.
Maybe that one definitely popped up.
Or possibly even Philly, Toronto, just because Genji's so prevalent and Agilities is so good on that character. But it's still, I don't know if they can face up to it. But there's not, I don't think there's any that look as delicious as last week's Houston, Dallas.
Honestly, one that I think could. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be close, but one that I could see going 5 is actually the Mayhem versus the Justice. I know it sounds crazy. I know it does, but like,
What you talking about, Willis?
I just have this. You know how you sometimes just get those gut feelings about teams for 1 week. Not saying they're going to win, but they're going to actually perform. I think
That's
the Justice.
indigestion, Ed. That's indigestion.
Your face is indigestion. Burn! I got you, good fucker. No, I think it's gonna be Mayhem Justice outlier. But if I was to bet on any NA game, Fusion versus Gladiators.
Okay.
Do you think so?
I could see Fusion Gladiators being a real barn burner.
So,
That's
on
good
that...
old JR.
Yes. On that note, Ed, like, do you feel like we're gonna see like a mirror of last week? Like, are you expecting Bishu to come back into the tank lineup again this week after Space was benched?
No. No, I don't see him.
Bishu, it is Bishu's comment though, where I think they were doing the math. The last time Bishu played, it was like this same time last year for one map for the Guangzhou Charge, and then season 1. And then the last time before that he had played was in season 1, where he played one more map before getting replaced by Void.
Hmm.
Poor Bishu.
He's the most likable person in all of Overwatch League. I don't care what anyone says. He is the most likable person right now.
I don't know. Ark's pretty likable in person. He's the only one that didn't BS us when we were asking New York in the press conference after the stage 1 finals. We're like, "Do you guys miss home?" They're all like, gave the generic answers, and he goes, "I really do miss home. I miss my friends and my family, and I just wanted to come give him a hug." Like, he was so sincere.
See, I would have put money on Bishu, Jaehong. Would have been one when he was still around in the league.
Yeah, those are good
when,
ones.
when it was
When he was still playing. Tavik is still the nicest one I've ever met.
Tavik's pretty cool. Tavik gave me
Tavik is
the
probably the
recording
nice.
that I got to send to Blevins so he'd come back out when we were at the Overwatch League party at BlizzCon.
Oh,
You
my
were a
dog.
madman there. You were a madman.
Oh my
You
dog.
told him. Yeah, you told him your whole story.
Oh yeah, no, I went to town. I explained how everyone had some form of my dog in their title, and he just started cracking.
and that
up.
was multiple weeks too. Yeah.
multiple.
We were
weeks
at the
of my
forefront of
dog.
that, and then everyone just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But like,
Everyone.
I mean,
Dare you
nothing
say
will ever
everyone
finish too lifted.
Did
Total
everyone
title.
jump off my dong?
No.
Ba-dum-bum. Double entendre. And Totem's
phrasing.
cutting that one out
Nah,
of the
I'm not-
episode.
I don't cut shit out. That just does not happen. But yeah, definitely some interesting matches to look at ahead this week. So let's make some predictions for this week. So I had a couple of games written down that I want to get your guys' thoughts on and how you think things are gonna shake up here. So on Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, the aforementioned Florida Mayhem match is happening against the San Francisco Shock. Now, DraftBuff has been pretty good about adding people. Is there a shot that you think Tayo can just come in and just outright play here? This is a matchup that, last time they fought, Genji was not in the rotation. There's been some pretty good banter already leading up to this match where, Shocker like, look, we didn't need him last time we played you. How are you guys feeling about the fantasy potential of this one?
I mean, that's the one that I said looked pretty good.
I think it'll be a good game. I have to imagine they bring Tayo out because they already showed pictures of him with the team.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, but
I think
where's he located at?
He's in NA.
he's in it, like he's with the team. They already have
Okay,
pictures of him.
okay.
Like I mean, they have been pretty good. I know Onigat and Kevster were up like within a couple days of them getting signed. So I'm pulling for this one, but I would probably pick Florida players over San Francisco just because we know who's going to be playing besides Choi and Violet.
Yeah, I don't want to say that you should start him in this matchup. I'm actually kind of leery of any Shock players to start.
Yeah.
To be honest, like you want to say, oh, Violet, Moth, or Sleepy, and then you're like, are they gonna play all the time?
Yeah, like I've said before, we always thought Huck was the Bill Belichick of the league early on, but no, he's not. He has the demeanor of him, but the real Bill Belichick of the league is Krusty. I mean, you don't know what he's gonna do.
Mm-hmm. So it's definitely Boston screwed up letting him go.
Yeah.
Like, oh, come on. I know you let all your players go. Just imagine how good Boston would be if they kept Krusty and, like, all the players that they let go.
Yeah. I'm just glad they're not because, yeah, I don't like Boston teams. So,
Well, it's to everyone else's
Suck it,
advantage
Boston.
because we get to see the growth and the actual potential of said players that have been under that particular system. So looking at Saturday, a couple of APEC matches that I want to talk about. At 1 a.m. Pacific time, we got the Dynasty versus the Hunters. And there's another interesting game, which Honestly, to me, it's probably going to be one of the closer ones on paper at 5 a.m. Pacific time, which is the New York Excelsior going up against the Guangzhou Charge. So, again, Charge been looking pretty solid here as of late. New York coming off of a really tough loss, so we'll see what sort of rebound, if any, they're going to have. But, that's always been a team that in the past has seemed to be easily rattled, just knowing that kind of like stigma that has followed them after their shortcomings in the playoffs. But, they've been pretty composed in regards to the regular season. So, first match, very hard to read. I know, like, for a while, Ed, you and I have been pulling for the Dynasty, but, like, with the way that the start times have been, we haven't been as close to, like, on the pulse as we used to be because of, the current situation, but, it's a situation now where I don't know. All we know is that the Hunters have been the weakest team out of APAC. But we're still in a situation where, even after all of this time, there's still been so many different components and moving parts to this whole dynasty that we still don't quite know what to expect from them as a team. So, what sort of confidence do you have in that particular series with the dynasty?
None. They're the most infuriating team because the talent is there with the dynasty, they're just not performing. And like I do think the dynasty are going to win against the Chengdu Hunters. I do believe that, but I'm also like Seoul could come out and just lay a giant goose egg and do nothing. Even though they have all the talent in the world, they're just not going to do shit. It's kind of like as odd as it sounds, the Titans from earlier in this year before they blew up the team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that there was a bunch of shenanery going on, but they still had all the talent in the world, and they were still getting...
That's a good point. It does kind of feel like that.
So it's one of those things where I just don't get it. And the thing is, Seoul has been like this for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've had the talent up the wazoo. And
it's the Korea curse.
No, there's a couple other things from it. You saw this week they finally started Marvel and Michelle. I think
they did.
Full game. Granted, I don't think they won that game, but I think it's a coaching issue. Number one, I'm gonna have to say it on this show, and it's going to be a controversial opinion, but Gesture is washed, and I think that's where they need to go.
I totally thought you were going to go the whole Volumel route and be like, Prophet is lazy.
Prophet can pull anything out of his butt.
No, he took all kinds of shit for that article.
Except the Echo.
You're seeing it, though, like, where, like, illicits coming in
Mm-hmm.
for certain maps, which, like, people sleep on Fitz. Like, Fitz is really good. You're putting, like, there's a lot of questionable changes or questionable decisions they make as far as coaching. And I think the problem I've talked with a couple different people about is that they never look cohesive. It
Right.
just still seems like season 1 London, season 2 London, where like there's a little bit of a game plan, and it's mostly just we're gonna run this comp. All right, now we're just gonna carry as hard as we can.
Yeah, and there's really not a backup plan on that front too. Like it honestly, like just watching the VODs, it feels like the Dynasty have just been this revolving door. They just keep spinning in circles. You don't know what's going to come out the other end, if anything. And that's why they've been such a middling team. They have been floating around like that 50% win rate across the entirety of the season. And, I just hope at some point the coaches are just going to hone in and, figure out, okay, here's our starting 6. If we're going to have map specialists, based on, if it's an assault or control or anything, that they go after that after the fact. But, right now, everything has just been so wishy-washy that I've just shied away from playing any Dynasty player at this point in time, even if, everyone still heralds Prophet as, one of the, more gifted players in the Overwatch League. But it just seems like at the end of the day, regardless of if you would classify Seoul a super team or not, based on the amount of talent that they have on that lineup, that they've still yet to live up to that namesake, and it has to be mentioned, like, at this point in time, will they ever be able to live up to the expectations that have been placed on them due to the fact that they are the only, Korea-based team?
And maybe that's the problem. Maybe the pressure is the problem and why they've been cursed since day one. Maybe, maybe that was Dallas's problem in the very beginning too. Pressure. Pressure can do a lot, and then also synergy. I mean, lots of esports teams traditionally just form and break up on a dime, on a whim, because people don't get along, and these kids are being forced to get along when maybe they don't. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on here, but it could be. Like, it could be going on for multiple teams. Like, I'm still pretty sure Carpe and EQO have some sort of rift. They just need to hug it out and win some stuff.
Oh, rumor mill, just in case. Be wary about starting Carpe today, because I know he took from what we're hearing, he did take the break in Korea, so he's flying back. He's probably back in Philadelphia already, but who knows if with quarantine or just with him being out of sync with the team. It's not like there's anything wrong with him, but there's other options I would pick before starting Carpe this week.
I don't think I could afford Carpe. Like, he's the type of player that, like, I'm not going to spend the money on him.
Yeah, and that's worth discussing too. There are definitely players out there. Like, I'll use Crimzo as an example because he's definitely on the higher end in regards to, like, player caps here. Crimzo going into this week has a cost of 90, and I know, like, for the most part, his fantasy output has been very positive, but at what point do you draw the line on potential versus the actual cost of the player? Because you're going in each week, if you're playing on default, with an average player cost for your team of 60, and you see someone that's 30 above that point. Like, is there a certain point where you guys feel like shies you away from seeing someone as a viable option in regards to their player cost?
Talk about a loaded question. It's just boom. It's one of those things where most flex supports right now are too overpriced. Most of the top. So I won't pick them because it used to be you had to. The way it was last season is you had to have two flex supports, main supports, which utter shit. Right. Like, you couldn't even start. You're starting someone who might play over a main support last year, but now it's like, well, main supports are doing just as much, and it's I wouldn't say infuriating, but it's where you can get the most bang for your buck. Like, for instance, this week I picked Jexay. And he was a cheap option as a main support. Let's see, who did I?
Although I would say, though, if you're looking at the APAC region, you wouldn't want to go with main supports playing Mercy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it kind of depends on which side of the pond you're on.
But I think flex supports as a whole, though, you can hold off on the big ones. Like, you're talking the Crimzos and stuff like that, because you can get more bang for your buck spending that extra cash on DPS or tanks and getting a lesser known support. Is somebody talking shit about me?
No.
Crimzo is definitely the Peyton Hillis of fantasy football.
Yeah. Crimzo definitely would be.
I remember when Peyton Hillis, all of Wisconsin voted for Peyton Hillis to be the cover of Madden because that was the running back
between
him and Rodgers to be on, and it was up to fan vote.
I won 2 leagues that year because I just picked him up from waivers. 2 cash money leagues.
Cash
I
money,
got
yo.
so lucky.
dollar bills, y'all.
I was
I
waiting
think-
for you to say that.
I think that when we look at like what the actual like price points are,
Mhm.
I know like for tanks, I am not spending very much money at all.
Oh, yeah.
Supports, I might spend a little bit more, but generally, I'm trying to save as much money as I can so I can buy like a 70 coin, 80 coin DPS.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That was
I try to
cool.
get at least one top-notch DPS. Now this week, you can still get like, I got Dante this week for 65. I consider Dante a top-notch DPS,
Right.
and he was cheaper than most of the top-notch DPS. He's not as flashy as most of the top-notch DPS, but he does perform well.
Well, I called him the best Western DPS weeks and weeks ago, and I still
you-
stand by it.
Would you say he's the best around?
Around.
Nothing's ever gone.
Boo.
Only Doha can get him down.
Boo.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
definitely it's been interesting though, because like when you talk about the player costs, like especially with DPS, there's like a huge variance in regards to your top options, and it seems like on the higher end, you have like the elite DPS in most cases, which are like 75 plus. And like if you're going out of your way to like get Crimzo at like 90, then it kind of puts you in a situation of, well, I'm looking for like a DPS who's like 35 to like 40 to try to like counterbalance that, and you're like, well, that leaves me with what, like Blase, which sure would have worked great this past week, but like I don't know if that's a viable option moving forward.
I feel like every time I fill out my roster, I get 3 in, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta redo this. Because I try and pick
This
like
is
top people, and I'm like,
awkward.
okay, I gotta pick 3 more, and I only have 75 points left.
The Hulky says it left him with Tuba last week, and that didn't work out so well. I
There's worse
mean,
options than Tuba. Tuba's at least gonna play.
Tuba,
You're not wrong.
Tuba.
You know what?
Sorry.
Hey, Bob. You know what Tuba's name is backwards?
But.
A butt.
A butt.
But yep.
A
I heard
butt.
that. I heard that on Push the Point, and Labasco cracks me up because he never laughs at your jokes. He's like, okay.
I know how you feel, Labasco.
He'll never give. That's the best part. At least Totem will smirk, which he doesn't come across in an audio format. But Totem will be like, anyway, we're gonna move on to this.
That's the same thing Jaw does to me when we're podcasting. He's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
yeah,
And so,
that dynamic does not change across the board.
Do we think Guangzhou stomps New York?
No.
I don't think so. Like I really feel like map potential for like potential for map 5 is pretty strong in this case. My concern is more so in regards to the substitution that New York is going to have, because Who Are You was doing really well, and they took him out, and then they just kind of shit the bed. So like, I don't know, but like the Charge have been very consistent here as of late. New York has still been putting up really good fantasy points as well. But it's APAC. Like, I would still pick Rio week after week, at that 50 cost. Mr. Consistency across the Overwatch League in regards to fantasy potential there. But, outside of that, it's all a matter of, like, okay, what rotation are we going to see from New York? They still seem kind of not really knowing who to, move in and move out. And Who Are You has kind of been the player who's been getting shuffled around the most. But, fantasy potential-wise, probably near the top end of that one. And I know there's a lot of rumors, too, about potential sign-ins coming up in the Overwatch League. I know Iris to Atlanta Reign has been getting thrown around quite a bit with, like, the third impact changes. So keep an eye on that. Like, maybe we'll even hear something before this weekend. But I would say out of all the games, that New York Guangzhou match in particular probably has the most potential.
Gonna be good. I won't watch it live, but it's gonna be good.
it just depends. Sometimes I'm like up doing something on like World of Warcraft or something, and I'm like, oh, dude,
It's 4
Overwatch League
a.m.
is on. It's 4
I
yeah.
should. I should
And
watch
then
it
I'm like,
at 4 a.m.
and I'm like, I better go wind down, and then I'll watch it and fall asleep watching it.
Yeah, so there's one other team I want to talk about really quick before we kind of wrap up, and that's the fact that we have Paris here, who haven't lost since they took the last monthly tournament. We find ourselves in the Genji meta. They've really come into their own here as of late. So they got a matchup this week against the LA Gladiators, and this is a team who, for Paris has been making up a ton of ground. Like, if we're looking at this team on paper, you would have to think like we've seen good production from Ben Best. Their DPS rotation has still been like in and out, but are you guys confident in starting any of their DPS here in this particular match?
I'm gonna let Ramses go first on this one.
I mean, Soon played the entire week,
Mhm.
well, the entire weekend for Paris, but oops, sorry. Again, we don't know. I will say I'm pretty confident about Paris winning this game because I think Gladiators have proven to us that they are a gatekeeper team at best right now.
Yeah,
And
looking at the scores from this past week, Dune and Sparkle were back-to-back in regards to where they placed. You had Soon, who was 106.73. Sparkle right behind him. And both are like at the exact same cost. There's only like a 1 coin difference here. Sparkle was 105.86.
And then Gladiators, I think you're still starting Bird Ring. Like that makes I'm down to start Bird Ring, but it's Sparkle's the only one I would say I feel mostly confident, and even then that's like 85% confident because who knows if they want to run Ash Tracer, we could see them run XC soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably start Sparkle. I would start Sparkle just because I think with the who we don't have this week, I think getting a Genji play in there is not the worst thing in the world. So I think we're gonna see him there a lot. Birdring, I think, is a smart pick. I don't think any of the other DPS I would pick though.
Yeah, I'm same with you. Sparkle, Bird Ring.
Yeah,
Sparkle, Birdring. As far as DPS goes, like I'm not talking the other ones because that's a whole different shenanery right there. But yeah, it could be definitely something that's interesting to see how dominant Sparkle could be this week.
Yeah, and it
And
is
he's
worth
not
noting.
expensive. That's the
He's
thing.
not. It's like 62, 63 points. But to the point here, like Genji, regardless of region, has been the most popular hero pick this past week. In both NA and Asia as well. Higher than any other hero at any other role. So
I mean, he's a little bit overtuned at the moment.
a little bit. We know that some experimental changes are due to hit live this week. Hopefully it will happen before tomorrow when Ed and I record Heroes Never Die. I'm not gonna hold my breath because, typically they like to just do shit after we record. So it's probably gonna drop Thursday, knowing our luck. But
or during.
Yeah, that too. But we know that changes are in the works for Genji because of how well he has been performing in game. So we'll definitely be keeping you guys up to date in that regard. But anyways, guys, let's go ahead. Let's close out the show for tonight. So please do us a favor. head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there's anything you would like to see us discuss on the podcast. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. And, only so many more episodes left because, season is quickly coming to an end. But, thankfully, we got Tony Hawk to talk about here in a couple of months. So, yeah, more banter on that in September? That sounds about right. But, you guys can support us a couple of different ways. So, Ramses, please go ahead and plug our Patreon.
Yes, sir. So if you want to help out the show, give us some additional support, you can consider pledging to us via Patreon. Tiers start at just $1 a month, and you can find all the information and all of our benefits at patreon.com/OWL Network, where you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons like Daniel, Owl, Kesha, Agent Life, and 044 in helping our network grow.
Absolutely. And Ed, please let our listeners know how they can contact the show.
Muted.
You
I almost
actually
spent the whole
caught. You
episode.
actually
Almost the
caught
whole
it.
episode.
Like I actually got to see that in real time, because normally, you just start and then I have to butt in here, but like
I caught
that
it
was
as
almost instant.
Uh-huh.
You caught me by surprise there, Ed.
Go to hell. So you can reach us through email at contact@owlnshow.com, on Twitter, and that's at OWL by the numbers. We do have a website, and you can go over at owlnshow.com. We do have a YouTube, and that's youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We are on Discord at discord.me/OWLnshow. We do stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLnshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. Our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. So we have Overwatch League Network, which airs Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific. This show, OWL by the numbers, airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Heroes Never Die, the variety Overwatch show Totem and I do, airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then Tavern Tales, a Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast Totem and I do, airs Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific over at twitch.tv/Tavern Tales HS. It's the return. It is the return of the random question of the week.
Finally.
Okay,
42.
what connects? Name the thing that connects Men in Black and Star Wars.
Aliens.
Besides aliens.
My answer's correct.
Looking for something specific.
That is specific.
That's
I remember
that's fairly
correctly-
broad.
If I remember correctly, there's a specific alien that's in Men in Black that's also in Star Wars.
You know, you're thinking E.T. and Star Wars,
In
where
Phantom
they
Menace.
where
Yeah.
they show the E.T. race in the Senate for Star Wars. This directly links. I will tell you this: it links Men in Black and Jabba the Hutt.
No, because I was gonna do the smartass answer of saying both franchises have movies that I wish I could just have wiped from my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Any
have no
guesses?
clue. Uh-uh.
All right. So you know those three little aliens that help them out? That like they just hang around the office.
Like the
They're
cockroaches?
yeah, not the. Yeah, they're about that size.
Yeah,
Those guys. Yeah.
What you doing?
Yeah. When you first walk in and you first meet them, they're actually speaking the same language as the Jabbas speak.
Huh.
Interesting.
The more you
Same
know.
language. Connected.
I never would have guessed that.
Nope. All right, so you can follow me personally on Twitter at Ednar83 or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ednar. Bob, where can they find you at?
Real quick plug for my new podcast, my new show.
Yeah, because you're gonna
Uh,
remember the name. Unlike me.
I
last
I started Warcraft Reloaded. It's all about classic World of Warcraft. Even if you don't play classic, you might enjoy it if you played vanilla back in the day. Lots of things have changed, and there's lots of stuff I'm sure you've forgotten. you might enjoy reliving it through a short podcast every other week. So give it a check out. It's Warcraft Reloaded. And you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. Ramses, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ramses_OW. You can find my other show at PushPointPOD.
Which is also a Mash Those Buttons podcast, just like the classic WoW one.
True. Like the classic WoW one, like Dropping Spicy as well. We had a guest on for a special episode this week that will in like another week or so that we had to explain to them why I mistakenly thought Jeffrey Rush was one of people's sexiest men of the 90s. So that's something I'll never live down, and I'm getting used to it.
Who the frick was that?
You were there, remember?
No, who was the special guest?
We had Tormented by Gnomes on. He's
okay.
Observer League.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay.
Well, as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at TumblyDrunk. Same with Twitch at twitch.tv/TumblyDrunk. So guys, make sure you set your lineups again. Matches start on Friday this week, so keep that in mind whenever you are setting your lineups or joining your draft royales. All of that good stuff, and we will see you guys back tomorrow night, where hopefully we'll have experimental changes to talk about on Heroes Never Die. You take care, and have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.